Good evening, I'm Glenda Chong, and tonight's top stories. Singaporeans prepare to head to the ballot box tomorrow to elect their next head of state. Some are flying back home, while others are already making their way to polling stations overseas. Over in Singapore, preparations in full swing as the Elections Department readies over 1,200 polling stations across the island for tomorrow's vote. Closed-circuit television cameras to be mandatory at all preschools and government-funded early intervention centres by July next year. This comes after a series of alleged child abuse cases in recent days. And also tonight, a treat for astronomy enthusiasts, a rare blue supermoon illuminates the night sky and it will not be seen again for more than a decade. While voting for the country's next president begins tomorrow for Singapore, citizens living abroad are already making their way to overseas polling stations to cast their votes. And that includes in the United Kingdom, where Julia Chapman joins us live. Julia, we know that voting has been underway for a few hours now. How's the turnout been so far?
Well, there's been a steady trickle of people arriving here at the Singaporean High Commission in London since we've been here. But we understand there were quite a few voters who came to cast their ballots before they went to work this morning. The ballots have been available to cast since 8 a.m. when the polling station here opened. It will close at 8 p.m. local time, meaning many can come after work and school as well. But there are certainly those that have made the effort during their working day to come here and make their voices heard as part of this electoral process. And of course, this is also the first time that people have been able to vote by post, so not everyone is coming to do that physically. But those that we've been speaking to said it was important to them to place their ballots in the ballot box. Some of them said it was more ceremonial, it made them feel part of a bigger process, and all of them said it helped them feel more connected to Singapore while they've been living abroad. So undoubtedly quite a lot of Singaporeans making the effort to come down here and cast their ballots in this presidential election today.
But Julia, what's the sentiment like? Are Singaporeans there excited to exercise their vote, especially for those who couldn't vote back in 2020, in the 2020 general elections because of COVID-19 restrictions?
That's right. Although many of the people who live here in London were able to vote in 2020, others who had to come from other countries to cast their ballots in London were prevented from doing so because of COVID restrictions, meaning that this is a new opportunity for them to get politically engaged once again. And even though postal voting is now an option, there are still people who have made the trip from other countries here to the UK in order to vote in person. One Singaporean woman earlier today said that she had come from Luxembourg to vote here in person in London. There are others as well. Of course, there are only 10 overseas voting stations around the world. London is one of them, but there are only a handful of opportunities for people to vote in person. And it is because of those COVID restrictions that voting by postal vote has become an option now after the law was changed back in March. And of course, overseas voters account for a really small percentage of the overall electoral system. 0.25% of registered voters are voting overseas. But some voters we've been speaking to today said it was really important for them to come and make their voices heard, because if the election is very tight, then it could be overseas voters that make the difference.
All right, many thanks for that. Julia Chapman speaking to us live from London. Now, meanwhile, Singaporeans living in Malaysia are gearing up for their journey back home to cast their votes in the presidential election tomorrow. After missing out on voting in the 2020 general election due to pandemic-related border closures, many are determined to make their voices heard in person. Afifa Arifin reports.
49-year-old Singaporean Doreen Sim runs a tech company in Kuala Lumpur and has been residing there for almost 2 decades. She missed out on voting in Singapore's last general elections in 2020 due to the border closures caused by the pandemic. She's excited to be able to cast her ballot in this presidential election and has been following all the campaign action online.
I think this is important for me to go back, really to exercise my civic responsibility. Thankfully, Malaysia is close to home. The post-pandemic world is going to pose a lot of challenging issue for us. It's really important to vote in this PE because we really need a strong and sound head of state.
Doreen is among the many Singaporeans in Malaysia preparing to journey back home to cast their ballots, either by air or land. There are no polling stations in Malaysia. Despite postal voting being available this time, many still prefer to cross the border and vote in person due to its close proximity.
Now, heavy traffic is expected at the causeway over this long weekend due to the public holidays in Malaysia and Singapore. And so commuters are encouraged to take into account possible delays at immigration checkpoints.
In the spirit of unity, Singaporeans in Johor are pooling resources to make sure their fellow citizens can cross the border seamlessly. One of them is Greg Lowe, a Johor resident for about 12 years. The 42-year-old is the voluntary administrator of a Facebook page that connects fellow Singaporeans living in the country. This election, he's spearheading a carpooling initiative.
So from there, we actually just say what time to what time we want to take the car together and wait for which part of the area in Johor Bahru. Then from there, we'll find our convenience way to go. So we plan to maybe carpool together with some of our friends, Singapore friends, then around 9 a.m. going back for voting. For me to go and take bus to go inside, it's actually very hard and troublesome.
For Singaporeans in Malaysia, the call to vote resonates across borders. And these citizens are determined to make their voices count. Afifa Arifin, CNA, Johor Bahru.
Back home in Singapore, the Elections Department is busy readying over 1,200 polling stations across the country for tomorrow's polls. Clara Lee gives us an inside look at what to expect.
Come tomorrow, Geylang Serai Community Club will double up as a polling station as Singaporeans living around the area vote for the next president.
On polling day, stations open at 8 in the morning. Voters will need to bring along a physical or digital NRIC or a valid passport. They will also need their polling card or e-poll card, which can be found on the SingPass mobile application. Election officials will check their documents before ushering them towards the voting area. Once it's their turn, voters will be handed their ballot papers. They will head over to one of these booths where each voter will mark their choice with an X. These ballot papers have to be folded and dropped off in the ballot box. Voters are advised to leave the premises once they're all done, and polls are set to close by 8 p.m.
Apart from community clubs like this, polling stations are also set up at places such as schools and pavilions at HDB blocks. And to ease the process for seniors or voters with disabilities, the Elections Department is putting in place measures, including a priority queue and officials on standby ready to help.
I will approach them and say whether they are voting in this particular location and to ask them if there's any specific assistance that they require, whether to be pushed in within the space, the voting space itself.
Security protocols will also be in place. The police have warned that parking is not allowed within voting premises or even along the roads. Officers will also be monitoring the situation throughout the day.
The Elections Department has refuted claims online that a self-inking stamp that will be used for the presidential election tomorrow has been treated with disappearing ink. Such claims had also circulated during the general election in 2020. ELD says the marks made on ballot papers using the X stamp are permanent. The ink used is oil-based and is water and temperature resistant. It adds that it's not compulsory to use the stamp. Voters can mark the ballot papers with their own pens. Still ahead on News Tonight, Japan looking at another year of record defense spending of more than $50 billion as tensions with China and North Korea deepen. Plus,
Coldplay, Taylor Swift, Jackie Chung. Getting tickets to their concerts was an almost impossible task. But why was that the case? And how can you snare your next concert ticket? Hi, I'm Shrey Bhargav, and I'll have the answers later on Talking Point.
My Mitsubishi Electric StarMax aircon saves me energy and money. It's easy to clean and is so quiet.
Release of a new national map of China has rekindled territorial disputes with Asian neighbours ahead of a key summit of ASEAN leaders next week. It's prompted one Southeast Asian nation to suggest long-stalled negotiations for a code of conduct in the South China Sea could be delayed even further. China has urged parties to view its new map in an objective and rational way. Among the most contentious elements, there's one extra dash to Beijing's historic 9-dash line right next to Taiwan. The island is accusing Beijing of undermining its sovereignty. In its response to the map, Malaysia says it'll send a protest note accusing China of encroaching on its maritime areas around the eastern states of Sabah and Sarawak. It reiterated the need for negotiations on the complex and sensitive South China Sea issue and a code of conduct. But the Philippines now hinting progress on that front could be delayed. It has rejected China's territorial lines for cutting into Manila's exclusive economic zone. Well, in particular, an area it refers to as the West Philippine Sea. China also facing flack beyond these contested waters. India was the first country to lodge an official protest with the map showcasing two territories it considers its own, the Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh, which China refers to as Jiangnan and considers as part of southern Tibet. Well, the diplomatic friction between India and China might have a spillover effect next week, with reports suggesting that Chinese President Xi Jinping might snub the G20 summit in New Delhi. Reports say Premier Li Qiang will travel to India as China's representative. Mr. Li is reportedly expected to also attend a summit of East and Southeast Asian leaders in Jakarta next week. Neither China nor India have confirmed the reports. If confirmed, Mr. Xi will be the second notable absence after Russia's Vladimir Putin pulled out. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov will be representing Moscow. Japan is looking to spend a record $53 billion on defense for the upcoming fiscal year amid deepening tensions with China and North Korea. The Defense Ministry says it will set aside more than $6 billion for ammunition and weapons, including new ship-to-air missiles. The spending plan for fiscal year 2024 to 2025 also includes funding for new landing ships, transport helicopters, and a new specialized transport team to improve deployment capabilities. The request will be sent to the Finance Ministry as it prepares for the budget, which will be tabled in Parliament next January. The bumped-up request is part of Prime Minister Fumio Kishida's plan to hike defense spending to 2% of GDP by 2027. Spending has been capped at 1% for the last few decades. Singapore's Trade and Industry Minister Gan Kim Yong says ASEAN's diversity poses both challenges and opportunities for its members. While the 10 member states are at different stages of economic development, he says this diversity also means they can help one another integrate, for example, through a planned regional electronic platform.
We are now working on the Digital Economy Framework Agreement. This sets the framework for our collaboration within ASEAN on digitalization. And digitalization has many aspects, as many of you are familiar with. It includes a digital trade facilitation, digital payment, digital e-bill of lading, and digital financing as well. So I think this is something that is very promising.
Speaking at a dialogue during the 7th edition of the ASEAN conference, Mr. Gan adds that this diversity also plays well into the growing green economy. He says countries with excess green energy can complement others, like Singapore, which have limited alternative sources. At the conference, 2 agreements were signed between the Singapore Business Federation, UOB, and Y3 Technologies to support local businesses expanding into ASEAN. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be in Singapore next Thursday for a 2-day working visit. In response to media queries, the Prime Minister's office says Mr. Trudeau will call on Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong. In a separate statement, Mr. Trudeau's office also says he will meet key private sector leaders while here. It's part of his week-long trip to Asia to take part in the ASEAN Summit in Jakarta and the G20 Summit in New Delhi. This will be Mr. Trudeau's second visit to Singapore as Canadian Prime Minister. His last trip here was in 2018 when he paid respects to his great-great-great-great-grandmother, whose plaque can be found at Fort Canning. Senior Minister Teo Chee Hean says, amid rising protectionism, Singapore is busy expanding its network of partnerships. He made the comment at a student union forum organised by Nanyang Technological University. Mr. Teo spoke about how Singapore is navigating the 4 challenges of geopolitics, climate change, technology and societal changes. While Singapore has signed various agreements like the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, he says the Republic wants to create more opportunities for everyone.
We believe that by creating more growth in a world that is more open for trade and investment, there will be more opportunities for everyone, including us. And that's why we do it. There's also a geopolitical reason, because like the CPTPP, by bridging the Pacific, we hope to bring both sides of the Pacific closer together.
Amid the threat of climate change, Mr. Teo says Singapore is actively preparing for the world in the year 2100. Now, he says even though Singapore is a small country, it has advantages in its political stability. It's allowed the country to make long-term plans and execute it in advance.
We have continuity in policy and execution. And therefore, we can conceive of and actually believe that we can execute something which we are going to do for the next 50 to 70 years to the end of the century. Not many countries can do that. Most of them think to the next general election, the next term of government. That's it. 3 to 5 years is a long-term plan for them.
Coming up on News Tonight, local businesses hail the easing of work permit restrictions for certain occupations, but many say it's not a silver bullet to resolving the manpower crunch. Plus, residents and out and about as they try to catch a glimpse of a rare blue supermoon that's said to be the brightest one yet.
Weather Report brought to you by Mitsubishi Electric.
Preschools and government-funded early intervention centres in Singapore will be required to install closed-circuit television cameras on their premises starting in July next year. The Early Childhood Development Agency, or ECDA, says this will enhance security, help in investigating incidents and provide greater peace of mind. Now, under the mandate, preschools must install cameras in key access points and in areas like classrooms, play areas and infant napping rooms. The move comes after 2 teachers were arrested this week for allegedly ill-treating children under their care at Kinderland preschools in Woodlands Mart and Choa Chu Kang. But ECDA says the law comes from a regular review of security and safety measures and is not due to recent incidents. For the parent of one of the affected children, the move is long overdue.
First of all, I think it's a good move that all preschools should install, mandatory installation of a CCTV. However, waiting till 2024 is still quite a long way. We still have about 3 more months to go. So my suggestion to Kinderland Choa Chu Kang actually is to install ASAP.
The Singapore Children's Society is also warning about the psychological impact on the children affected and on classmates who witnessed the mistreatment. In a statement this evening, the organisation says violence against children should never be tolerated. It adds that younger children are more vulnerable where abuse is concerned, as they are less able to identify or articulate wrongdoing. Now, at the same time, the Kinderland preschool chain has removed the principal of its Woodlands Mart location from her duties. A former teacher there is one of 2 educators arrested this week for allegedly abusing children under her care. In a post on Facebook, the operator said the removal is pending the outcome of investigations into both cases in Woodlands and Choa Chu Kang. Kinderland adds that they are also monitoring the well-being of the affected children and offering counselling and additional support to their parents. At least 300 cooks from India are in talks to join several Singapore restaurants as work permit holders. And this comes as the Manpower Ministry lifts some work permit restrictions tomorrow. The move allows selected employers to hire from non-traditional source countries. Clary Lee finds out how these firms are gearing up to bring in new workers.
This Indian restaurant is looking to hire more help to work in its kitchen. 3 cooks are on duty every day. The plan is to ramp up to 6. It is now possible because the non-traditional source occupation list is now in effect. Some employers will be able to hire workers from a wider range of countries. However, it is limited to 9 occupations. Jobs like cooks working for an Indian restaurant is among the list. An association representing such eateries says a few hundred Indian nationals have expressed interest to work in Singapore.
Singapore having many Indian restaurants, these cooks are very excited to come over here to meet their friends who are already here. So they are happy with the environment. The proximity between India and Singapore is so near and the culture is so close.
Other jobs on the non-traditional sources occupation list, which was unveiled during last year's budget debate, include welders and food processing workers. Housekeepers and porters were also added in August, making it a list of 9.
This hotel also wasted no time in putting their hiring plans together.
We will be putting placement advertisements in the source markets that we are looking at. And secondly, we're also looking at placement companies in Singapore to help us with, organizing that as well.
But Mr. Tan admits the new regulation might not be a long-term solution to their manpower crunch.
Millennium Hotels and Resorts have already utilized our quota. So even with the current status that they're allowing non-traditional source markets, there is not enough quota to actually bring them into the workforce.
And that's not the only challenge. Mr. Tan noted that the new source of foreign workers may not have the necessary language skills. But for now, hotels like this one welcome any extra help.
Tonight in the sky, something rare. Look up and you'll see what's known as a blue supermoon. Blue refers to the fact that it's the second full moon in the month. Super points to the fact that it's at its closest distance from Earth. Both occurring at the same time, that's a super rare phenomenon that many tried to catch a glimpse of. Now, many at popular beach hangout East Coast Park managed to bathe in the glow of the supermoon. Well, at first, disappointment as clouds obscured the view. Then, at around 8:30 p.m., the clouds parted and the phones came out to catch a glimpse of the rare sight. Tonight's moon is supposed to shine brighter than normal. The next blue supermoon will be in 14 years. And this has been News Tonight. Talking Point is up next.
All set? Any minute now. Yep, I'm getting ready to buy concert tickets. Yes, getting a ticket to see your favorite artist perform is no mean feat. And no matter how hard I try, it still feels like it's all up to luck. Is that true? Or can you actually game the system? Well, you don't need a ticket to find out, because I've got the answers for you right now on Talking Point.